My name's Rachel Lutwick-Diener, and I'm an assistant professor in the English department here at GRCC. And I'm happy to be hosting this session of Who Cares, Why Bother, entitled Editing Your Own Work in the Real World. And I'm pleased to welcome our guests, Erica Wikander, Rori, Meyer, and Jay Forstner. This is going to be a question-based panel, so I'm going to ask a question to our contributors, and then you'll hear what they have to say. Thank you. All right, so if you could start off by first telling us what is your profession and what education did you get in order to enter your field?
I am an attorney, and I practice primarily family law and divorce. And I have my undergraduate bachelor's degree from University of Michigan and my law degree from Wayne State University.
Hi, I'm Rori. I'm an adjunct professor, so I'm all over the place. I teach at Aquinas College and Cornerstone University and Grand Valley as well. I got my Bachelor of Arts in Writing from Grand Valley in 2010, and then I got my MFA in Creative Writing, nonfiction specifically, from Georgia College and State University in 2014.
And I'm Jay Forstner. I'm a freelance writer. I'm a journalist. I'm an advertising copywriter. I do marketing communications and fundraising, pretty much whatever anybody asks. I'll say, yes, I can do that, and then that's what I do. I got my undergraduate degree from Bowdoin College in Maine.
Thank you so much. So what we'd like to hear about is what kind of writing you did in the course of your education to prepare you for writing in your career.
You want us to go the same?
Yeah,
Okay.
the same's fine, thank you.
So I pretty much only do legal writing. So in law school, you have to take a class called Legal Research and Writing, and you are primarily learning how to draft briefs, legal briefs for pretty much the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. That's the primary type of brief that you're learning to write. The writing that you learn is research-based, so researching a specific legal issue and then making that a written argument to a court. And that's pretty much the writing that I did in law school.
So I started college as a nursing major, and I finished as a writing major, so I went quite a journey. So I actually did a lot of different kinds of writing as an undergrad. I was in a lot of science classes to start with, so I did a lot of those biology lab reports, and I was in a few marketing classes and advertising. So I did a lot of different things before I even got into my writing major. And then once I was a writing major, obviously it was the more traditional English types of papers with research and but I'm really glad that I had a lot of those different experiences with writing because I feel like it gave me a more well-rounded idea of the types of writing that exist in the real world. It's not just English papers. There's lab reports and proposals and emails that you have to be comfortable writing, and I feel like I got a lot of experience with all of those different types of writing.
Yeah, I'm sort of similar to Rory in that writing was not something that I thought I was going to go into. My dad it was an English professor, and then he was an English teacher at my high school, and all the advice that he gave to me was, don't go into that, stay away from it. But it was something that, and so like a lot of you probably, you don't always listen to your parents. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. I went to college thinking I was going to be a hockey player, and then I was going to go to law school. And then I started writing for the college newspaper. Is there a college newspaper here? Is there something like that here?
Yeah. The collegiate.
Yeah. So once I started doing that, it came out every week. It came out Friday, right about dinner time, and I wrote this column for them. And I sort of fell in love with the idea that I would go to the dining hall on Friday evening, and as everybody was sitting down to eat their dinner, a lot of them had the college newspaper in hand, and they were looking at my column, and I loved that. And so I sort of fell in love with the idea of seeing my name in print and having every once in a while somebody would come up to me and talk about something that I had written, and so I've been doing it ever since.
Thank you so much. Now, what do you remember about the quality of your work in college or graduate school and the steps that you took to revise your work in that setting?
I have a hard time thinking back to college writing. I was a communications major, and so I'm going to focus more on my law school writing. But in law school, when you took legal research and writing, there were very specific steps that you had to follow before you were submitting your final papers. We usually had 2 to 3 large papers, briefs that we would write. And you couldn't submit the next version until you went through each step. So, your initial research and just draft form based on your thoughts of what you think the law is saying to make your argument, and then moving forward to clarifying that even better to make sure that it's concise, and then to the final draft. And another part of writing in a legal form is to be as factually accurate as you possibly can. So even though you're being argumentative and writing about the law, you have to also make sure that your facts are 100% accurate and that they match up with the law. So sometimes you'll read something and say, I understand what the law is saying, but it's just not aligning with what my facts are. And so you have to go through the revision process over and over until you can convince somebody that your facts apply to this law.
So, as I said before, I started as a nursing major, and in high school I had always really liked creative writing, and I was pretty good at that. When we would have to write like a narrative piece about our lives, I could do that pretty well. But when I entered college, I did feel a little bit like I didn't completely have a full grasp on what they were expecting of me in college. So I was actually probably closer to like a B, low B, for even in my English classes as an undergrad. And it wasn't until I became a writing consultant at Grand Valley. So when I had that opportunity to start looking at other people's work and seeing what they were doing, that I started to actually see, oh, okay, I see what this person is doing and how it could be better. Maybe I should apply that to my own writing as well. So that drastically helped improve the quality of my writing as an undergrad, actually stepping outside of just looking at my own words and looking at my peers as well.
I have to start with a confession. I was a terrible student in college, horrible. So I'm gonna tell you what you should do, and it's not what I did. But everybody will tell you that you need to make an outline before you start writing something, that you need to keep careful notes and all those things, and they are absolutely right. I have never done any of those things. In one of my first English classes, this is being recorded, so it's possible even my parents are going to see this.
We can black out your face.
Okay, can you take out this part? Sorry, Mom and Dad, I skipped a lot of classes. And so I didn't always go, and one of the first papers that I handed in to my English professor, I hadn't been to a whole lot of the classes, didn't really know the subject matter, hadn't done an outline, probably hadn't even read I think the book was Billy Budd, Herman Melville, something like that. So then I wrote the paper. Well, I can do that. And I don't even really need to have all that much to go on, and I can churn out a 10-page paper or whatever it was. So I handed it in. A couple days later, the professor contacted me and wanted me to come into her office. So I went in thinking she's going to tell me what a terrific paper it was, and instead she accused me of plagiarism. I thought that I had copied this from somewhere, and I said, no, absolutely not. And then the reason was she had noticed I wasn't in class a whole lot. When I was there, I didn't seem to be paying attention. So she was really surprised that I was able to write this paper. So I convinced her of that, and then I decided from then on I was going to read everything that I was supposed to read, and I was going to do an outline and all that, and I went back to being just the way that I was. So I'm telling you that so that you will do the opposite. The truth is, if I had done things like come up with an outline and do all the reading that was supposed to be done and make careful notes and everything, then my work would have been much better than it was. So do those things. Do as I say, not as I did. Is that what they say? Yeah. So.
Thank you. Do not follow Jay Forstner's
Right.
example.
If you leave here with one thing, that would be.
Now, what kind of writing do you do in your career right now?
So I don't do any Court of Appeals or Supreme Court brief writing. So the majority of the work that I do is what we call motion practice. In family court and in district court and circuit court, a lot of times you are asking a judge to make a decision about something. In my cases, it's a decision about something that has to do with a couple getting divorced or a child or child support. So you draft what's called a motion, and the motion is a numbered document, typically with a brief that can be in support of it, and you're asking the court to do something. It has to be based in fact and based in law. And the biggest thing in my practice is to write truthfully and accurately. Even saying something like, it was clear that this happened, could get you in trouble, because as I've learned, nothing is really that clear. So to be concise and to be truthful and factual, and then to find the supporting law in your brief to support your argument. So that's the primary type of writing that I do. I also draft a lot of letters to clients and to attorneys. I a lot of times will draft emails when I'm angry or frustrated, and I delete them right away, but I get my thoughts out. So obviously a lot of emailing, which is also in letter form. But I think primarily motion drafting and brief writing, and being, when I say 100% truthful, you never know when a document could come back to haunt your client. And, oh, well, your attorney said that you were clearly doing this. Isn't it possible you're doing this? So you don't ever want to get into that loophole. And I probably also don't remember my college writing as much because I also didn't go to class as much, and I would recommend that you not do that. So that's probably why I don't remember.
So the type of writing that I do, because I'm a teacher, I write a lot to my students. So I'm constantly writing notes of, here's how you could revise, and making notes on their manuscripts, and then writing them maybe like a letter at the end to give a synopsis of it. I write a lot of emails, which is really important in the professional world, being able to convey, sometimes it's to my students, sometimes it's to other professors, and then also my own personal writing that I do. So as I said, I'm a teacher, and then I write creative nonfiction and poetry. So I'm always working on my creative work as well.
I've been writing for this publication for 28 years, I think. I've had something in every issue. This is called the Ann Arbor Observer. It's in Ann Arbor, and it comes out every month. So I still do some of that. Like I said, I do a little bit of advertising, copywriting, but the bulk of my work is a very strange arrangement. I do fundraising communications for hospital foundations all around the country. And I do that through this company that's in Minnesota that hires me to do the writing. So hospital foundation, I'm doing something right now for a hospital in New Jersey. And so they have the people at the foundation, and then they hire this company in Minnesota to write their brochures and direct mail letters. Then the company in Minnesota contacts me, and then I will do a conference call with usually a patient from the hospital and sometimes a doctor and then I write one of those annoying letters that you probably get in the mail sometimes asking you for money. Well, maybe your parents get these letters in the mail, and it's a tough line of work in some ways, because for the most part, people pick up that letter at the front door of their house, walk into the kitchen, and throw it in the garbage. So what I have to do is try to grab onto people in the very first sentence or so of the letter and get them to care about what I'm writing to them about. And then the rest of the letter, once I have their attention, if I do, is trying to convince them that they should give money to this cause. And I think from what I'm told by these people in Minnesota, the letters that I write are more effective than ones that they've had before. The first time they told me that, they said, oh, your response rate is twice what we've had before. And I was like, oh, great, what are we getting? Like 40% of people are responding? And they said, no, 4%. 4% of the people that we send it out to are responding by writing a check to the thing, which it turns out was great, because normally it's 2%. And when you think about it, if you have somebody getting that letter and then having to go and get a checkbook and then an envelope and a stamp and all that stuff, getting them to do that is pretty hard. So 4%, I'll take that. But the reason I say it's sort of an unusual arrangement, I've been doing that for about 5 years, and I've never met any of the people that I work with in Minnesota. I've never met any of the people at any of the hospital foundations that I work with. It's all email and over the phone. I think that's unusual. Maybe to you that's not, but I think it's odd.
Jay, I just want to follow that up with a question. Now, the work that you do for Ann Arbor Observer has your name on it, right?
Yep.
But those fundraising letters doesn't. So do you feel differently about the work that is associated with your name?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. One of the reasons I still do this work for the Observer is because, like I told you, I fell in love a long time ago with having my name in print and having people talk about what I do. The stuff that I do for this fundraising thing, it's an interesting challenge, and my wife is a physician, so I know a little bit about about healthcare and all that, so it's sort of a natural thing for me to do. I'm not nearly as invested, I think, is sort of what you were sort of getting at. I'm totally anonymous in that whole process, because I'm just sort of the hired gun that comes in to do this stuff. So even the people at the foundation that I'm doing the work for, they're much more connected to it than I am. So I don't have as much stock in it.
All right, thank you. That's very interesting. Now, how much time would you say you spend writing in your careers right now?
Probably, I was thinking about this as I was walking here, probably if I would just think about, motion and brief writing, that's probably 50% of my work. But writing everything from emails to letters, probably 75% of my work is writing. And the other 25% is, meeting with clients, actually being in court, making arguments, but a lot of what we do is writing. And I guess something else that I write are, settlement proposals, which are similar to contracts. This is what we propose, this is an offer, this is what we agree to. And so that's a large part of my work as well.
Yeah, I think we do a lot more writing every day than we think. When I was trying to think about how much writing I do, almost my entire job is writing. Like I said, I'm writing to my students, emails, notes on their papers, but I'm also I'm reading the next thing that I've assigned for them, and I'm writing notes on it, and I'm planning out, I'm writing out what are we gonna talk about, what are we gonna do. So if you're in education, you're pretty much writing the whole time. So the only time I'm not actually literally writing is when I'm in front of the classroom and we're going through the lesson for the day. But most of my job is writing or meeting with students one-on-one and having a conversation with them about writing. So it's pretty integral to my job.
Almost all of my work time is writing, except when I'm on those conference calls with people. But then, so much of it is thinking. I mean, when I really sit down to finally write something, I might produce what I'm working on in less than an hour. But the truth is, I'm thinking about it all the time. I mean, from the time that I learn the story of some cancer patient in Texas, and I hear their thing, I usually have about a week before I have to hand in a draft of the letter, and that's just constantly on my mind all the time. I'm thinking, how are we, okay, and I've done hundreds, maybe 1,000 of these things, so I'm constantly thinking of how am I going to tell this story in a different way that's compelling to people. So there's a lot of thinking, and then once you get it, then it just flows and you're done.
Thank you. Now, this is really the meat of our panel here. So I'm curious as to how you approach the editing process with the writing that you currently do in your career. How do you ensure that your documents are ready for submission? And also, what concerns do you have about your work when it comes to editing or polishing the documents?
So for me, I'm in private practice. I have 2 partners and we have 2 secretaries. I work for myself primarily, so I don't really have someone that is always reviewing my writing. When I was an associate at a law firm, I would have to submit drafts to the partner or the attorney that I was working for. But primarily, all of my editing is I do my own editing. However, in very limited situations, if I draft a brief in preparation of trial that I'm going to submit to a judge, which is setting forth the facts that I plan to present to a court, the arguments that I plan to make, explaining what my different witnesses are going to be testifying to, or if I do a closing brief, which is basically summarizing all of that, which I did in court, I do typically have either one of my partners or one of our assistants review it to tell me if I am accurately articulating what I'm trying to say. As a third party who may or may not know a lot about the case, do you understand what I'm saying? Or sometimes you do know a lot about the case. Is this coming across accurately? And for me, I usually will draft something really quickly at first to get my thoughts out, because I have a lot of thoughts about what I'm writing about. And sometimes I have to just jot it down so that I don't forget what I'm thinking about. I take a lot of notes, too, in my job. And so I always will do a quick draft so that I know everything's in chronological order the way it should be, or broken up into different sections. And then I go back and I edit it several times. I review everything I write before I submit it to an attorney, to a client, and especially to the court several times. I hate having typos and grammatical errors. It's a pet peeve of mine. And undoubtedly, I usually find one after I've submitted something afterwards. But I really try really hard not to. And again, for me, I need to read every single sentence, and every single sentence needs to be 100% truthful. And it seems strange to say that because, well, of course, you're a lawyer, so you gotta tell the truth and, write the truth. But even the slightest, exaggeration can get you in trouble. And I have clients, and most of my work is based on somebody's life and something going on in somebody's life. So I have the clients read it for accuracy. And I will tell you that a lot of what I draft, if it's a motion or a request to a court, I also have the client sign it as a verified document, because if an attorney submits something to a court that is knowingly inaccurate or has been prepared without doing due diligence, it could be a violation of my ethical obligations to the court. And so I'm very, very sensitive about that obligation. And also, I don't want to get before a judge and have a judge looking at what I'm writing and say to me, well, prove that, and I'm unable to prove that. So I do a lot of editing. And a lot of it is just me reviewing it and reading it to myself, and does this make sense, and is this truthful?
Thank you.
Yeah. To jump off of that, it really does. It takes a lot of people in the editing process. It's I mentioned that I started as a nursing major and I was good with the creative writing portion, but the academic kind of writing was harder for me. And I thought that if I got help with that academic portion, that I was somehow admitting like, oh, I'm not good at this. And I felt, but I am good at it. I'm good at this creative part. And so I sort of lived in this belief for a while that if I got help, then I was somehow sort of admitting that I was a failure. Eventually, luckily, I figured out that that's not true. It's really good to get help from, writing consultants, from your teachers, from even if you're at a job and you have, your supervisor, like, look over what you're saying, so that you can make sure exactly what Erica's talking about here. Make sure that you're right, that you're telling the truth, that you have presented the best, put everything out there that's the best you can do. It takes a lot of people to help you with the editing process. You shouldn't feel like it's something you have to do by yourself. That being said, it's always good to, one of the things I like to do is I really like to read things out loud. I like to write things by hand. If I'm having a hard time with parts, sometimes that like blank screen on the computer can be really intimidating. So writing things out by hand, going back in, feeling like the structure isn't right in something and trying, okay, I'm going to completely just try to start over and see if that takes me somewhere different. So editing is this sort of long process that, that you really want to get as much help as you can. Take advantage of those people around you.
I think that's a really, really important point. When you write something, when you put something on paper, or even when you're sending an email, the person who's receiving it, your audience, your reader, they don't know what was in your head while you were writing that. So they don't have that context, and you may not have taken everything that you thought you were taking from your head and putting on the page. It may not have all come through to them. So somebody who's an editor or even a friend, just another set of eyes, they can tell exactly what, they won't have this other stuff, so they know exactly what is going to be, what you're going to be getting across to your reader. So anybody that can do that for you, that's really helpful. If you're lucky enough to have an editor, I have the same editor for this publication I've had for 20-some years. I was telling Rachel the other day, I wrote an article for them recently, and it was this fun thing, and there were bits in it that I thought were funny, and as I was writing it, I was thinking, John, my editor, he's going to take all these out, because that's what he always used to do. And sure enough, when I handed it into him, he really liked it, and then he said, I'm going to take out this part here, this conversation at the end. And I was like, that's the best part. But I pushed back, and I didn't always push back. But when you have something that you've written and you think it's good, and you can back it up, and you can make a case for it, stick up for yourself and stick up for your work. Editors, again, they're just like anybody else. They don't know everything that was in your head when you did it. They're just looking at what's there. So sometimes you have to make your case. Sometimes you might have to revise it, like I did with that piece, and it can be frustrating. It can be really frustrating sometimes when you have somebody who's criticizing your work. You hand something in and it comes back with red ink all over it and different suggestions. That can be really frustrating, but it invariably makes it better when you can focus more and fix the things that need to be fixed.
All right, now the final question that I have is, what do you know now about writing and editing that you didn't know as a student?
This is a tough one, I think, for me. But I think it was said before is that it takes a really long time, at least for me, to finish anything I'm writing. And I think when I was in school, you want to not necessarily rush through things, but you're just not as conscientious about, putting forth your best effort to submit the absolute best product that you can. And I think part of it for me is that in law school, at least, it's, fictitious writing. I mean, I'm writing about real things, but they're not my cases. And now it's my cases, it's my reputation as a lawyer to a judge, to other attorneys. So I think recognizing that it takes a lot of time because it's coming from me, literally, whereas in school, my writing wasn't necessarily outcome determinative, where it is here now. So I need to make sure that it's the best product possible, and it just takes a lot longer than you think it is. If I have a brief to submit, I have to start it well in advance, and that might mean that I'm editing it over several days, but I can't just do it the night before. So time.
Yeah, time is a big one. I would say another thing, when I was in school, there would be, paper assignments, and I would try to come up with a topic that I would think, I can find lots of information on it, but I wasn't really that interested in it. But I would just try to think of it in those sort of like, I'm going to try to make it easy on myself and find lots of information. But actually what that did was that actually made it harder on me because I wasn't interested in it. So a lot of times when you're writing in school, like think about what you can take from your own life to sort of use as a springboard into, okay, how does my perspective inform what I might say in this paper? Because if you can find some investment in it, it makes it so much easier to write it. It really does. I can't say that enough because it's hard when I see students struggling because they've tried to pick the path of least resistance and they've ended up picking something really boring to write about. Find the things that interest you and try to work them into your papers.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think when I first started as a writer, I think that, and I think a lot of people fall into this trap, I wanted to impress people with big words and fancy phrases and lots of description and all of that. And the more I've done it, the more I've realized that less really is more. I was editing something for somebody the other day, and I kept trying to get her to shorten what she had written. And she had words in it that I could just tell that she felt like, I'm a writer, so I need to use, there was a sentence that had whereas and threshold in the same sentence. And it was in this thing that was supposed to be this very sort of conversational marketing piece. And trying to get her to just shorten things. Everybody thinks that, when I work with companies on marketing communication, sometimes they'll say at the very beginning, we need to communicate. So that usually that means we need to send something out to everybody. Well, sometimes if the more that you send out, the less people actually pay attention to, and the less people will actually read it or listen to it or pay attention to it. So choose your message really, really carefully. Keep it short. Keep it conversational. Use words that people actually use. If you're taking notes, I don't know if you guys know this writer, Elmore Leonard, who passed away recently, is from the Detroit area. He has Elmore Leonard's 10 rules of writing, 10 commandments of writing, something like that. Write that down, look it up online. They're simple, they're sort of funny, and they are great. That will guide you through almost anything that you're writing about, from creative fiction to anything that anybody's going to see. So look those up.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to give the audience of students here a chance to ask any questions that you might have for our panelists. Any comments?
What's all of your names again?
Erica Wikander.
Rori, Meyer.
And I'm Jay Forstner.
How does the relationship between your writing and talking
Well, lawyers do a lot of talking, and we wouldn't want to write down everything that we say. But I think most of my talking, if it's before a judge or to another attorney, is somewhat, I'm making an argument or I'm advocating for someone. So if I've prepared a written document in that case, what I'm saying has to align with what I wrote. It's typically I'll write something, if I go to court for a motion hearing. So I've drafted a motion to a judge, I'm asking a judge to do something, and then when I show up and make the argument, I'm not reiterating what I've already said. I usually have separate notes for this would be better stated as an oral argument than in writing, because I think I'll be able to elaborate more in writing, or it doesn't make as much sense. For me, I guess it's convincing somebody that what I wrote is truthful and is based in law.
Yeah, writing is a lot about conversation, and so whenever I can possibly, I try to meet with my students individually and talk to them about what they've written. This makes it easier on me because I don't have to mark every single thing then in the paper. And besides that, what I've found over my years of teaching is that even if I mark every single thing, there might still be like questions, like I don't know what you mean here. So it's just better to have an actual conversation about what I've written down, rather than just having me write it and hand it back and hope like, okay, now you've got it. Let's actually have a conversation. So that works a lot. It's in my field.
A lot of my work begins with interviewing people, whether it's as a journalist or when I'm doing one of these letters for the hospitals. And I think one of the things with that, you're probably in a lot of the things that you're going to write, even as a student, you might interview people. The magic of the open-ended question. If you just ask somebody, sometimes if I'm on the phone with one of these patients, I'll just start by saying, "Tell me your story." And that is so much more effective than saying, "I see that you were diagnosed in 2012, and how did you react to that?" If you get people to open up and then just talk, and then occasionally you sort of have to guide them, but they're going to tell you so much more. And when I'm doing that work, I'm always looking for that sort of oomph moment, and I don't really know what it's going to be going into it, but there's always going to be some little detail that makes their story interesting. And sometimes it's really hard to uncover that, but sometimes the best way to do that is to keep it open-ended and let them talk.
Can I follow up with that? Because it's kind of funny that you said that. And primarily when I'm arguing or if I'm asking someone questions, I do not want it to be open-ended. I want to know exactly, if I'm in court, I want to know what their answer is going to be before I ask the question. However, when I first initially meet with new clients, I'm always saying to them, tell me what's going on, tell me your story, so they open up. So I kind of go from one spectrum to the other. And then if I'm in court, I don't want any open-ended questions because I don't want something to be said that I didn't know was going to come out, which has happened.
Any other questions? Well, thank you again, Erica, Rory, and Jay, for joining us. This has been a really informative and fun discussion, and thank you, students, for attending. You can get stickers for your participation outside in the little gathering area. Thank you.
How did you decide I didn't go to class?